Bombini na CEFA 2020. Nós está hopi excited dita aqui na awe mainta. For our guests, welcome, bienvenidos to the beautiful island of Aruba, and we are very excited to welcome you to our island. So, my name is Rubiela Lampe. I'm from this beautiful island of Aruba, and I'm very excited to be here. And this morning, I'm together with Mr. Kenneth Olson from the USA, with Maria de Los Angeles from Peru, also with Juana Camacho Otero from Colombia, and Kevin de Cuba from our island Aruba, and Mr. Ken Webster is live with us from the UK. Welcome. We're going to start a little bit with introducing ourselves. Tell us a little bit who you are. So we're going to start with Mr. Kenneth. Maybe you can tell us a little bit who you are, what you do.
Yes, my name is Ken Alston. I'm a founding partner of Circularity Edge, a consulting firm in the US which deals primarily with sustainability and circular economy matters. And I've been working through my lifetime in sort of two phases. The first phase was working inside industry for maybe 20 years. So very much involved in implementing environmental activities inside a company. And then for the last 20 years, I've been consulting to industry on the sustainability and circular economy questions.
Thank you. Maria?
So, thank you for welcoming us. My name is Maria Franco. I'm from Peru. I've been working in international development with focus in agriculture. The first part of my professional development was in applied research. I've been doing life cycle assessment in the agri-food sector. And then I just moved to work in designing projects, implementing projects, promoting agriculture as well in Peru and along Latin America. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will have Juana from Colombia.
Thank you, Rubiela. Yes, I am Juana Camacho. I currently live in Colombia. I returned to Colombia after 7 years living in Europe. I was finishing my PhD in design for the circular economy. Before that, I did an industrial ecology master's in Sweden and in Austria. And now I'm working with the water supply company in Bogota, the Empresa de Acueducto y Alcantarillado de Bogotá, because we want to implement circular principles in the water sector in Colombia and in connection with also climate change goals. And before that, before going to Europe, I was working in Colombia on climate change issues and biodiversity conservation. And that's when I realized that we need to move upstream in the production sector and consumption sector. And that's why I decided to go back there to go and study in issues related to what is known now as circular economy, but it was industrial ecology. And I am an economist, and I have a first master's in ecological economics.
Thank you. And next, we'll have Kevin de Cuba.
Yes, thank you. It's great to always be home. So this year we are in Aruba, Dutch Caribbean, and I was convinced or got my eureka moment after seeing a 50-minute documentary, which is what back then was called Waste is Food. And that's a documentary about the whole philosophy or the principles of cradle-to-cradle design. And after seeing that, I got my eureka moment. And that was like 2006, 2007. And from that point forward, I decided, okay, I found my calling, and this is what I'm going to do professionally for the rest of my life. And that has evolved over time in deepening my knowledge and doing my homework in understanding cradle-to-cradle in particular, but then it's expanded to all the interrelated schools of thoughts. And over time, when Ellen MacArthur Foundation started promoting circular economy in the in the mainstream and at a much in the international level, we found that circular economy serves as a good medium to bring all this knowledge and thoughts together under a framework that I believe is a very interesting paradigm shift that allows us all to rethink what we do, how we live on planet Earth, and how we interact. And where I see the point, I see the purpose behind it. So if you ask me why we are all here together about talking about circular economy, it's all about finding ways for us as human beings to thrive on planet Earth without impacting it and impacting our own future ability to survive and to thrive on the planet. And I think that circular economy brings all together in a holistic, integrated way. So that's from my take on it.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Let's hear from Mr. Ken Webster from the UK. Can you introduce yourself?
Very much. Thank you for the invitation. I hope I can be heard okay through the system. My work started in this area when I helped found the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. I was invited to provide some of the background thinking and support the energies of Ellen MacArthur and the small team at the time. So I was head of innovation through to 2018, and the last couple of years I've spent time between two universities, the University of Exeter Business School and the University of Linköping in Sweden. I'm also director of the International Society for Circular Economy.
Thank you. I'm going to briefly tell you about myself. So I'm Rubiela Lampe. I live on this beautiful island of Aruba. And in Aruba, I manage an engineering firm. Basically, we do several projects in industrial and also commercial projects in Aruba and also the neighboring islands. Okay. So basically, I think we're going to start off by asking why circular economy? Why is it important? Why is it important for the world, for the islands, for all of us? I think that's the key question to start with.
Who wants to start?
I think we can start with Maria.
Sure. Well, as Kevin was good saying, there are so many concepts, so many definitions that circular economy can definitely take and put it in a single or in a general definition. In my side, and for example, in agriculture, we definitely try to connect, for example, all the value chain and to try to use this concept of generative agriculture, and then that's with this is why much more or less we can work. Maybe Kenneth can introduce some fundamentals. Maybe, sure.
Well, for me, I think we have to differentiate first between a concept and then the complexity of the real world. For me, concepts are simple because they're there to give you, as Kevin said, the paradigm shift, to make you change the way you think. And so I think back to 33 years ago when we had the first definition for sustainability or sustainable development. And it was, again, a short definition, but making us think about future generations and not doing things now that would impact negatively for future generations. And so it's a way to change your thinking. And then we started talking about 3 E's. So there was economics, environment, and equity. So we weren't only thinking about money. We had to think about society. We had to think about the wider environment. And these were all little concepts and ideas to change the way we think. And I think circular economy started the same way. It's like, hey, we've got to get out of this idea that we take things, we make things, we sell things, buy things, use things, and then we throw them away. And this is a linear flow. And we've learned that it's not sustainable. And so if part of the goal is to become sustainable, then we need to rethink things. And so this idea of not having the linear flow, but have a circular flow, as happens in nature, this is where sort of the beginnings of circular economy came from. But again, it's a concept. So first of all, we get the idea that something has to change from linear to circular. But then we have to put it into practice. And this is a whole different discussion from the concept. Because the real world is complex. We have manufacturing with very complex global supply chains, very interconnected. And you can't just say, okay, go circular. No, it isn't that simple. So I would start by saying, have an awareness and learn about the concept and change in thinking. And then we have to go deeper and deeper so that we can then put it into context. So it may be a water context, it may be an agriculture context, it may be an industrial manufacturing context. And then within that context, it may also be within a country or a city. And so we have to look at all of these different scales. And that's what the complexity that we have to work through as we move into implementation, which is the next phase after the alignment of awareness.
Yes, that's true. Thank you for sharing that with us. And I think with time, you see that a lot with the younger generation, with the kids. They are more aware than maybe our generation many years back. They are more aware of the environment and also how to preserve our resources. And I think that's a good start.
If I may, I think we all grew up with a very significant environmental awareness. I think so, and that's why we are working on these topics. And yes, that's the first step, that we need to implement different development models. But what I've seen in my, 20 years of experience is that, yeah, we had these younger generations 20, 30 years ago, and today we're having bigger challenges maybe than 30 years ago. So what happened throughout our lifetime as adults that didn't let us realize all those dreams of sustainability? And I think that's about structural change. So education is very important, because you need to have these kind of values, that environmental values that could help you make more sustainable choices. But we also need to have a structural change in how we produce things, on how we consume things, how we transport things. And that's one of the things that makes the circular economy concept very successful, maybe, because it is trying to change the mindset from a linear to a circular perspective, but it also presents these new ideas in a context of efficiency, which is what drives these structures, these social structures in the Western world, let's say. So the circular economy comes about from that need of, okay, we need more resources, or we have needs. We have a growing population in the developing country that has, let's say, more sustainable consumption patterns so far, but we are more people, and we need to lift people out of poverty. So we're going to need more resources. So we need to do it efficiently. But we also have consumption patterns in the developed world that are very intensive in materials. And we need to make those consumption patterns more sustainable, not just efficient, but sustainable. So I think the circular economy as a concept, not as a practice, because that's a different thing, can help with that. Or it was thought to help with that, how to supply those needs in an efficient way.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Mr. Kim? You want to share a little bit more on this topic with us?
Yeah, of course. It's very interesting to hear the perspectives so far. There's been a bit of research by Borello, Pescucci, and Cambalo they're Italians, but some of it's done in Exeter. We said there are three indisputable insights. This is from a review of all the literature. And these three are as follows. it is an umbrella concept. It brings together other schools of thought like cradle to cradle, the blue economy, natural capitalism, and so on, about 6 or 7 of them, but elaborates them in a narrative which is able to inspire policy action. Now, this has been very successful. In other words, it's a deliberately engineered reframing of the concept at around 2010-12. It already existed, but it was a repositioning of it to inspire policy, but also to inspire business. It's a social technical transition using innovative industrial systems. Walter Stachel always says the circular economy is an economic opportunity driven by innovation. So it's the idea we can do things differently and still make money, still make a business run. But it's also got another level to it, which I think is being hinted at already. It's not an efficient approach, actually. It's not efficiency. It's effectiveness. And there's a difference. In English, it may not be quite the same in Spanish or whatever. But efficiency is not enough. Living systems, living ecosystems, organisms, or whatever, are effective, not just efficient. In other words, they have an interplay between efficiency and resilience. And this is really quite a key difference. And so that's why Baumgarten McDonough, Cradle to Cradle, would say we have to celebrate diversity, because diversity hints at the creativity and resilience, which is so important to an evolution in this direction. So we want to design, not just allow, but to design industrial systems which are eco-effective, not just efficient, because efficiency is, if you like, still just trying to do less harm. Kevin will recognize all this terminology from Cradle to Cradle, to go beyond less harm to a positive cycle. Now, why is that so important? You might think it's just playing with words. But what I think captures the imagination about circular economy, and was the same with Cradle to Cradle, is it's not about doing less harm. It's about living and working and producing, consuming and exchanging in a modern world, not to go back to 1820. I mention 1820 because the building I'm in at the moment was built in 1819. But to be able to live well in a modern world. And I think that is part of the key to making it very attractive in a policy sense. It's not about going back. We don't use words like degrowth. We don't use words like, do with less. What you do is design products and services so that they can be enjoyed, but they are nutrients for the whole system. Now that's, I think, part of why it catches the imagination, if it goes that far. For some people, it's just, well, we used to do recycling, so we'll do more of it and call it a circular economy. You get a lot of bandwagon jumping in that way. But this research suggests that these 3 elements about being able to inspire business and policy, about an innovative transition, and that it's about eco-effectiveness, taking insights from living systems, characterizes, that's what they say from the research, the umbrella concept of circular economy.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your experience with us.
Yeah, I wanted to jump into what Ken just mentioned. I think that the key word you mentioned is eco-effectiveness. I've noticed that throughout the Latin American region, after working for more than 10 years, there's a growing group that easily or quickly auto-denominates their activities as circular economy, while in essence what they're doing is simply recycling 2.0, or simply trying to improve efficiencies within their existing systems, whether it's a supply chain or whether it's within the own business. I mean, a fabric or a industrial activity. What I mean with that is that you are right, Ken. It depends on the words that you use, the terminologies, the language has a lot of impact on bridging that gap of knowledge and understanding. And I hear a lot of people saying, yes, I'm doing a cleaner production initiative, and that's why it's circular economy. And if you hear if you carefully listen to the word cleaner production, you're already indicating that what you're doing is simply continuing what you have been doing, but trying to do it more efficient, or try to reduce the amount of emissions, reduce the amount of waste water generation, or whatever it is. And while the conversation should evolve, if you talk about conceptual aspects like the utopic goal you want to reach versus the reality, I understand there's a spectrum between that. But if you really want to come to circular economy solutions that are compatible with these principles, you are forced to rethink your whole product from the micro level all up to your business model. If you don't do that, it's just wastage of your time, and that's my opinion, right? For me, it's like I don't like to dedicate or waste my energy and time on things that I know ahead of time would not lead to that overarching goal. So there is where we all have to be very critical about when we engage, when we talk to our colleagues, and also not just let anybody just auto-denominate their activities as circular economy, because they are not. And we have to be able to make a distinction between one and the other without saying that the other is bad, right? And Ken and I have had many exchanges about this. We're not saying that the one is better than the other. It's just they are different things, different ways of aiming to solve a collective problem. But you cannot just put everything on the same heading. And that is important. And I see this evolving in this region to an extent that it might lose the value. We use the integrity of the word circular economy, and then it will become another nice buzzword over time. So if we really want to make the change, we really have to be adamant about what we do, how we critically validate them. And there should be somebody at the global level that actually has the ability to certify or confirm, yes, this is an idea, a solution that fits within this overarching work, in order to really direct our noses to the same direction. I see Juana wanting to give her opinion, so I'm waiting for your observation.
Yes, I wanted to respond to that because I have the privilege to have worked a lot in policy making and research for the past 7 years, but now I'm working on implementing circular economy, and I realize how difficult it is because we have Ken was mentioning is a new socio-technical system, and that's a set of materials that have come together and have been built over, 150 years of history of our industrial system. So the change is very, very challenging because we not only have to change the material part of it, but also the rules, the mindsets, blah, blah, blah. So I agree that we have to make sure that we are not labeling everything or anything as circular economy, but in our countries, especially where we haven't even reached the point where recycling is a thing, then it's very challenging. One may think it's very challenging to go all the way into the circular economy, but I also have thought about the leapfrogging. We should leapfrog towards circularity because although Ken says that it's not going back to the 1920s, where if you look at the history of development, back then there were in times of scarcity, there were practices that were very mindful of how we used materials. And that's something that I found in my research, that these kind of practices are, especially in developing countries, are connected to times of poverty, times of scarcity, and that's why it's a bit difficult to promote it among consumers. But because developing countries are coming out, are starting a development path that started a little bit from scarcity, we still have practices like repairing. They are still a bit spread out. Repairing, reusing. So we need to find ways of reframing these activities that are already established in our societies and bring them to the new circular economy era. So my point was basically that although we cannot brand anything or everything as circular economy, we need to be mindful of our context and our implementation capabilities. Because, for example, in the aqueducto and the water supply company, we only treat 30% of the wastewater of Bogota, and we're gonna start treating the other 70% in the next 5 years. So, but we were not thinking about the circularity process. A little bit, yes. So the design it includes a little bit of circulation and cogeneration, energy cogeneration, but the plants were not designed in that way. So now we're gonna be stuck with these plants for 25 years. So, but then you need to bring circularity efforts in some way. So the scale is going to be small, but it's going to happen. So implementation is very difficult. So when you think about it, you need to think about those restrictions. Thank you.
So I think if I can build on everything that's been said, I think it's not either or, it's both and, right? And so I think you have to be both eco-efficient and eco-effective, to Ken Webster's point. Because eco-efficiency on its own is insufficient, Ken is right. Because this is what we've been doing basically to deal with sustainability. We've been trying to be less bad. We've been trying to use less stuff. We've been trying to make things go further. And on its own, it's not enough. But it doesn't mean to say you don't do that. So you do all of that, and you do build on what exists, but you have to go further as well. And this is the challenge. You have to reimagine the future at the same time that you stay in business. And this is why you have the challenge in business. I had the same for 20 years working in the area. How do you reinvent your business and make it circular at the same time you make your money when you're in the linear? And it's a tricky transition, but it's both, not either or.
Yeah, in terms of context as well, I want to point what Ken says, which is not only efficiency, but as well resilience, and also to add to that the concept of diversity. So it's like, okay, we work on efficiency because we really need to have livelihoods or to to be sustainable in life, but also what about, for example, the resources that we are using, and then what about depletion of soil, watershed? So there are concepts that little by little are getting involved in the equation, and then diversity is something very, very important. Maybe we can go in deep later about this topic, but yeah, it's something that to take into account.
Thank you. I think one challenge, maybe you guys know that Aruba is a small island, and for sustainability is already, I think, we are not totally there yet. But I'm very interested in the circular economy. How do you think we can start this on the island? What are areas that are easy to start with awareness or projects? What's your thought on this topic for the islands? It's not only Aruba. I think many Caribbean islands, they face the same challenges. Mainly, for example, in waste management also it's a challenge. But what are your recommendations based on your experience on this topic?
Who should start?
I think the first step to understand the potential for circularity in a place and an island is a perfect starting point, because the boundaries are very clear, is to understand the flow of materials. And so what comes in and what goes out. And there you can find opportunities for closing cycles within the island. For example, food is a good place to start, where you bring most of your food from outside, maybe, and then, but what happened with the organic waste? Do you throw it in the ocean, or do you compost it, and do you have local farming? So how can you close that circle? Or, for example, water. I know you use desalination.
Actually, we use RO plants. Reverse osmosis we use.
But for example,
desalination.
exactly. So you have that, and then what happens with the wastewater? Does it return to the ocean, or can you use it to reuse it or recirculate it in the island, for example, with water for toilets or watering plants or cleaning the streets? For us in Colombia, we have a challenge with water reuse, and I think it's a low hanging fruit that we could use, and you also as well. So water, food are good starting points, but first you should understand what is the material flow of the island.
What is been working very good in Latin America are those small projects that are funded by the government, maybe some startup projects, some startup initiatives that have been working that are related to food, they're related to waste management, where, for example, people that is interested can apply, and also what they do is to identify a specific problem and a specific challenges. In Peru, they've been working, for example, a project named Simba, which is Simbasura, which is without trash. For example, they identified a specific challenge along Lima, which is, for example, the food that porks. This sector is being consumed, for example, and then what they do is try to collect all that trash and to convert and to produce proper food for these animals, within creating a new value chain. This is something that this is a specific project and a specific challenge, but has been and it's been developing for the last 2 years, and with this specific food sector problem that is being work is worth, but behind that, the back, the should be, supported by some institutional organization, some funded project that maybe can, support them during the beginning, because it's been sustainable, but at all it needs some support. This is one specific example that can be worth. Mm-hmm.
Thank you for sharing.
Could I add something?
Yes, go ahead, Ken.
Okay, thank you. When you're not in the room, it's hard to pick up cues as to when you should speak or not. So forgive me. There are a couple of great examples around of islands doing interesting things. And why these are perhaps important, of course, is that they can illustrate how you can save a lot of time by not having to rethink everything. I was thinking of Hierra in the Canary Islands. They have built over 20 years almost a new economy around looking at not just what flows in and what flows out, but how they could add value. I think this has been hinted at a little bit, add value with what they have, but by changing the fundamental infrastructure around energy, they're able to create a lot of cheap energy, which allowed lots of new businesses to thrive. They also developed a different approach to preserving fisheries, which had the principle was you don't catch the big fish. In other words, if you do catch the big fish, you put them back, because it's the big fish that are the source of most of the new fry. So they had a different approach to how they would do fishing. A lot of it was built on internal discussions. So it's finding your own way, but it did have an overarching plan, which was to add value with what you've got, shift to renewables, create surplus that would allow other sorts of investment to be brought along. They're very much moving towards having an electric car fleet rather than traditional car fleet, because one of the problems was importing diesel and fuel. So Hierro in the Canary Islands, I think, is a great one to look at. It's localized, it's for their problems, but they've had lots of experience in thinking through how loops can interconnect, if you like, how one waste can become food for another system. And it does require a bit of an overview. People have to, in a sense, buy into the idea of this transition. Otherwise, there is a danger you just do lots of little initiatives and hope that people smile a lot about it, when fundamentally you're not changing anything. You're just doing less harm again. Nothing against that, of course, but it's often what's missing, I feel, is the sense of overall direction. This is where we want to get to. And that gets substituted for this is what we can probably do at the moment. So there is that gap. But it's really, islands are the places where you can get this right, I think, because as mentioned, you've got these boundaries. Thank you.
I think you have a good start in that you already have a circular economy roadmap for Aruba, something that we worked on a few years ago when I was here last. And so I think there's some good thoughts that you can look at and say, okay, so what does that mean for us? It's a sense of direction. You have a high reliance on tourism. So what can we do about the tourist experience that begins to take these ideas into account? The more tourists you get, the more materials get used. And so what are the material flows around tourism? So you can look at, it sector by sector. And we can certainly look at more local food production. But I think this idea of building your resilience is a good place to start.
Well, as a local, and maybe I'm a bit extreme in my way of thinking and ambitions, but if you think about an island like Aruba, what do we actually have as resources? Next to the nice beach and the beautiful ocean and the nice weather, what else do we have? The only thing I can come up with is ourselves, our own people, our human capital that we have on the island. And if you ask me, if you want to go towards a sustainable circular island economy, we have to really invest in our knowledge, our intellect. We have the beautiful, unique opportunity to get access to the best universities around the world. Our population is relatively well educated, and we speak many languages. We dominate all 4 languages at least. And we have the affinity with the Europeans as well as with the Caribbean and the Latin America. So we have unique features as an island, if I'm referring specifically to Aruba. And there's where we need to put our, investment in, like go towards education and also being on the front end of cutting edge research. Research in the sense that I'm asking myself, we all are deploying solar panels around the world, right? And Ken and I are involved in a project with the US government, where only now they're thinking about, oh, damn God, after 30, 40 years of deploying all these solar panels all around the world, now they are going to become hazardous waste, right? And they spread all over the world. And then you ask yourself, was that the intended consequence of all this? I guess nobody would agree with that, right? Nobody intentionally is aiming to contaminate other places around the world. So the question is, where is the failure here? And if you go down the road or back to the origin of all this, it starts with design. It starts with conceptually thinking about what you want to offer, what service or need do you want to satisfy for the human being, and how you're going to do it, in what way, and what cocktail of materials or what combination of chemicals, right? So that's why I always love to have long conversations with Mark Dorfman from Biomimicry Institute, because it opens up a fascinating world of going to the basics, going to the level of molecules, going to the level of understanding that in nature, the whole ecosystem on this planet, that is so complicated when we talk about biodiversity, right? All the species, how they interact, all the processes that take place simultaneously in multiple continuous cycles. And you ask yourself, whoa, what happened with us as human beings? We are fully disconnected to this reality of which we are part of. And then you ask yourself, how is it possible that within this complex biodiverse system, they only use a select number of elements of the SI table, how you call it again, in periodic table, right? While we as humans use double of it because we have the ingenuity and creativity of exploiting resources and mining things, and we convert them in different, we use chemical processes. You're a chemical engineer, so you're very well aware of that. And we create new substances that have not existed before in the combination that we have been able to manipulate it, right? And then we don't even question the fact of, okay, what happens next after its use? Or eventually, is it leading to public health? Is it leading to any contamination of other types of ecosystems, services, etc.? So for me, that's why everything comes down back to the basics. If we do not intentionally design things properly, coherently, consciously, in line with these principles, for me, the rest is pure waste of my energy and time. That's why I'm so bold about it. Because, yes, we can leapfrog, but the only way we can leapfrog is by consciously, intellectually doing that. Not by just saying, oh, let me try to balance out the system or try to be realistic. No, if you really want to go to that leapfrogging stage, we really need to be talking the language that is necessary. So instead of saying, I'm going to help mitigate climate change because I'm deploying renewable energy technologies, that's nonsense. Because after 30 years, it becomes a problem. If you figure out a way to design whatever technology it may be that is composed of adequate components, adequate materials, adequate chemicals that still can do the function of converting irradiation to electricity, then we have a business. Then we have something concrete. Then, we can say, okay, that's a good solution. That's a great idea, and that's worth our collective investment, collective effort, and research, and whatever you need. But if we keep on talking about things that will not lead to the overarching goal, for me, it's why. So, and that is very hard to bring about or bring across, even among colleagues, and especially, the wider population. Because indeed, we are right. We live in a completely different context, a reality where people are still struggling to have food on the table at the end of the day or next day, have other priorities. They're thinking about, how do I make sure that my family is safe or in good health? Hardly anybody has the time or the conditions to think about these, let's call them philosophical ideas, and to make systemic changes. And so for me, that's my bubbling, not struggle, but impatience with all this, is that how can we really make the leapfrog? Because that is the ambition. How do we really do that in a concerted way, in a systematic way, and conscious? Sorry, but I deviated from your question about Aruba. But
well, yeah, I think, Kevin,
so we have to invest in our collective intellect. That is the point here.
But I think we also have to think about how siloed things can easily be. You're a chemical engineer, I'm a water engineer. I'm a chemist, you're a something. We're all together in this, and everything is connected to everything else. And so your example of the solar panels, which didn't think about some of these future other issues, you could say the same with windmills, right? All of the windmill blades that are being replaced now, where are they going? To a landfill, right? Because we never thought about that. Because we silo our thinking and say, I'm dealing with climate change. So now all I want to do is to change to renewable energy. And I don't have to think about materials. I don't have to think where they go, where they come from. No, it's all connected. Everything's connected to everything else. And Ken mentioned the cradle-to-cradle principles at the beginning, and you talked about diversity. This is why in the cradle, when you go back and reread the Cradle-to-Cradle book, which was first published in 2002, it's still as relevant today as it was 18 years ago, nearly 19 years ago, because it talks about you have to think about the material choices you're making, and are they toxic or not, and should I be using them in this particular context? It talks about are materials able to be recirculated and how do I get them back? In most cases, like you were saying, we don't even have the systems to collect things, let alone think about what we do with it after we've collected it. So there are so many missing pieces here. There's also energy immediately comes into the picture because you can't move anything around the world without using energy, and you're always impacting water. So all of these things automatically come back on the table, and we've got to respect diversity and respect the societal piece to it as well. And so this is why, for me, I always want to talk about a sustainable circular economy, because I can imagine many circular solutions that are completely unsustainable. And so I think we have to go back and marry the two things, the 33 years of sustainability thinking we've been doing with the circularity things we've been talking about so far this morning. And we have to bring the two together, and we have to get rid of the silos. I mean, I've been speaking a lot last year before COVID in Colombia, in universities. And, everybody starts talking about, we have to put it in the curriculum. And so now, what's it going to be in biology? What's it going to be in chemistry? I think first, for me, I would say, how do you even make your university work this way? I'd rather talk to the administrators first than the academics or the teachers, right, in the faculty, and say, why don't you just create an experience where you're living up to these ideas? And then it comes out in the curriculum.
Yeah, as you mentioned, I think the sustainability needs to become circular right now. That's what you mean, and not anymore linear as it was maybe 30, 40, many years back. And maybe it's good also to mention that many islands, the same as in Aruba, we import the majority of everything, 90+% of everything we use for ourselves and also for the tourism industry is imported. So it arrives on the island, but it never really leaves. So that's a challenge we have.
Well, it does, but I know which end of the island it lives in, right?
Well, one thing, so next to all the great ideas that you put on the table regarding an island community, you're right. Part is, the analysis of what comes in, what goes out, and what stays. But I like the aspect of also the conceptual understanding, first of all, the language that we use. I bet that both camps would agree with me that the language has a very powerful, is a powerful tool. And whenever I hear new initiatives being launched and talking about zero waste or things like that, I just crunch and then thinking, yeah, okay, fine, beautiful. But you know why? Because I think that reflects basically that you have not understood yet what circular economy is about, in the sense that it's about adding value. It's about recognizing that you have nutrients that have predefined uses and functions, and where you want to be a beneficial actor within the system. So again, if you take the example of the ecology, do you ever see a species that is negatively impacting its surrounding in whatever format? Right? Everything is the human species, yes. but when we talk about the other species, have you ever seen any how it interrelates in harmonious ways with the surrounding? And then ask myself, why are we not able to do that? We as human beings, are we so arrogant that we think we are above nature? Are we, we think that our collective intellect simply says that we can manipulate and use nature the way we want it for our needs, without realizing that that's the worst thing you could do, right?
But Kevin, I have to make a intervention there, because the human species, it's a biological term, but we also are a social entity, and there are communities that do not have or try not to have a negative impact in their surroundings, and they live in harmony with their environment, mainly indigenous communities. But there is a specific type of society that has grown into what we have now. And it's based on specific principles that have also helped us reach a point where we live to up to 90 years old. So it has its benefits, but it has happened in a way that it's threatening everything that we have accomplished. I agree to that, but it's good to not generalize. But of course, it's most of us. Most of us are detrimental to our home. But there are communities that have had a resilient, nurturing way of living, but it's not the majority, and they have been systematically attacked for that way of living. So they might not have a space in this society that we have built. So there's options there are places where we can look and learn about social experiences, economic systems. The problem is that scaling up those lifestyles, might be very difficult. So I think the main problem that we have as society is that we have been living, our way of life has been subsidized by oil, basically. So now we're starting to pay the price for that. And so we have to learn or find new ways of living and having the good life that we have. I mean, we have a good life. I mean, we have. There's people that don't have this kind of life, and we need to lift them up from that kind of life. So how are we going to do that? So that's the main challenge that I see.
Karen, I think you wanted to comment.
Yeah, I would like to comment because there's two Kens in the room, you see, so it's not easy. But I'll assume you're asking me. Yes, I want to comment. Welsh Darhel is useful for different phrases, and I've used him once already. But he says we don't want a circular economy of poverty. In other words, this was alluded to earlier. In times of scarcity and shortage, people are very careful with resources because they have to be. But when I was in Argentina, investigating some of the waste pickers, cooperatives in Buenos Aires and so on, I was asked rather interestingly, what about the waste pickers in Europe? What happens to them? How are they organized? And I had to say, well, we don't really have any. In other words, we have a municipal collection systems by and large in most of Europe. And conceptually, you see, I think this question of a circular economy is about how to move on some of the thinking. They were asking perfectly appropriate questions for their context. And I saw lots of evidence of them being able to add value with what they were dealing with. They had access to resources and infrastructure, which is where I want to get to. And there's quite a lot of work going on now about how to build resilience. And if we assume that almost all of the small businesses and enterprises all over Latin America, for instance, the majority of them, overwhelmingly, I know the figure for Mexico, it's over 95% of businesses have under 5 employees. But almost all of those businesses don't make much money. They don't have capital. They can't invest in a product design process. So a lot of people working in resilience are saying, well, if we agree that effective systems are an interplay between efficiency and resilience, how do we build up the resilience part? Because we're taking insights from living systems and saying it works like this. So a couple of suggestions that are floating around are, well, they need to be able to exchange more things. They need to add value with what they've already got. And infrastructure such as sharing platforms, temporary food store, materials and food stores, community kitchens, maker labs, dedicated local delivery systems, online bookable, on the phone. these are examples of infrastructure which enables people to say, oh, maybe I could use that waste that's there. It's not been thrown away, it's stored at the moment, it's still okay. Maybe I can do something with it. And so to build up the economic rationale for a circular economy seems to me that you have to add in, because none of these firms have got the capital, remember, you have to add in infrastructure that enables them to do things. It's like saying, here's some tools, here's some places, here's some materials. What do you want to do with it? It's up to you. Too many programs are run by bureaucrats who say, tell me what you're going to get out of it before we give you the resources. Really? That's a lack of systems thinking. That's a lack of appreciation of how things really work. It's a lack of appreciation of living systems. A forest doesn't go along and say, I want you to be here, I want you to be there, I want the tree to be here. And in fact, I think we can sometimes fall into a temptation to think that nature is full of cooperation. Well, I'm afraid it's both. It's cooperation and conflict. It works, but it's not one or the other, it's both. So, if you like, there is a struggle to find the niche within the forest. And there might well be a struggle, if you use the parallel with humans, about who gets ahead with this enterprise, who does it best, who gets the most customers, who does it better. And if there are, say, 5 companies using this particular resource and 4 of them don't make it, that's okay, as long as the infrastructure being provided is enabling lots of people to get engaged in adding value with what they've got and circulating the cash locally. Junto wrote a pamphlet on this, or a book, called Plan A for Argentina, which I think has got some interesting proposals in it, which is about building networks upwards. Because, my final point here is that what has happened in the world, it seems, since 2008 and the financial crash, is that people have become increasingly polarized. The economy isn't working for them. They know that, and they're getting angry about it, and they're being attracted to more populist or right-wing leaderships. And so there's something at the level of how does the economic system work, which needs to feed them, if you like, both literally with opportunities and a rearranged incentive system. Circular economy is a perfect outlet for that. And also for people to have to give up this idea that if only we apply more technology, if only we make markets more efficient, we will get to, or material use more efficient, we will get to a thriving economy. So that's, I think, one of the big problems, is that any circular economy that doesn't address the issues of development and do it in a way that isn't paternalistic or maternalistic, however you want to do it. If we can't do this by, in a way, setting them free to find their way through things with supportive infrastructure, I think we're in deep trouble. And of course, many of these things have been around before. Those of you of a Catholic persuasion will have heard of things like distributism. In the 1930s, it was an in-between place between the free market and deep socialism. The Catholic Church said we should have much more opportunity for people to get hold of tools and workplaces themselves, to be able to be creative. It was called distributism. And in a way, we're revisiting that notion of making sure people have access to tools, resources, and places to be creative in this more modern look at a circular economy, where the price of technology has really fallen incredibly, and that would allow a lot more distributed manufacturing and production. So although Aruba has a huge import of almost everything, as much like most islands, building up a network of tools, places, resources, land, materials, which people's ingenuity can get a hold of, you would see a thriving move towards a circular economy without having to label it. And I think that's pretty important, but it also takes, as somebody was saying, fundamental change in the rules of the game or the furniture in the room. I know the figures approximately. It's the subsidies for fossil fuels across the world are around $5 trillion US. Now that's a little bit more than the gross domestic product of Japan. So how on earth can you get a circular system going when you're subsidizing globally to the level of the GDP of Japan on making fossil fuels cheaper than they should be? You know, there's no way that unless incentives are rearranged and that a different economic direction is taken, that we can possibly move to a circular economy. At the moment, it all is about supply side efficiency, making it cheaper to access and own things, without thinking that it isn't actually a supply-sided argument at all. It's both, it's supply and demand. And to use a phrase from George Cooper, if capitalism accumulates, then democracy distributes, because it's circularity. And I think some people are really afraid to say that it's about both sides of the coin. That's why they're very safe and comfortable with just efficiency. Oh, efficiency doesn't change the balance of power or opportunity. Efficiency just looks like you're being really good with resources, resource productivity. People give you a pat on the back. When in fact, what you need to be able to do is to say, actually, taking insights from living systems, to have an eco-effective economy, you need to be able to have sufficient demand among people and sufficient tools and resources for them to build their own future in a confident way. They need a foundation to the way they live in order to be able to take up opportunities. And the last point is nobody who is anxious about food and prospects day to day can make good decisions. Psychologically, it's just not possible. So there's a lot of work to do to build an infrastructure that engages people, which helps push back the rightward swing or the more populist swing in political support, and does it at the same time as cascading materials, shifting to renewable energies, and so on. So it takes a great deal of vision to do it. And that's why I keep going back to that. I think I agree principally with you, Kevin, on this. It's no use just looking at some practical stuff and going, oh, well, that's where we are, if you don't have a sense of the future in mind. Because I think it was the writer George Monbiot in Britain who said that the centre and left hadn't had a new economic idea for 70 years. And actually, it's true, we don't have time to go into that, but they're not offering anything. So unless you're able to offer something, and it will include a circular economy, because for the minimum we've got these materials that could be adding value, not being used, we've got climate change and all the rest of it. But unless it's part of an economic picture, and I can tell you for a start, because I'm one of the few people who do it, tell me some other people who, well, I'm not praising myself so much, but tell me the people who integrate the monetary cycle with the materials cycle in circular economy. There are not many of them. Why not? Because if you don't fix the monetary cycle, you can't fix the materials cycle. You know, that's so obvious and so dumb if you don't get it, that I'm really surprised that we don't hear more of it. Oh, but we don't, because money doesn't matter. It's neutral in traditional economics. That's just not true. You see, there's some big blocks in people's thinking. So I'll leave it there. That's a tour of it, but it's a huge topic, is about building resilience by enabling people to use the materials and resources which are available in a way that allows them to be enterprising, but provides enough support for them to feel like that's something they want to do. So I'll leave it with that. It's not about a new app.
Thank you very much for your input. I think, as Maria also mentioned earlier about spinning off small project as you're doing in Peru, that's also a way to start, right?
Yes, I want also to wrap up something that I think that is pretty critical that says Ken, which is infrastructure. You know, for example, in a sustainable agriculture, what we let's say call society is community. So we change to this, and community means, you know, being aware of many things, or maybe all the things that happen, you know, support each other, working together. So maybe, like, let's say a transition or a similar way to talk that into this society that we are also working, or let's say that we understand right now, is trying to have this information, what is circular economy, to try to, let's say, to start promoting these things, but in the most accurate way. Like I'm just trying to say that community means being aware of everything, understanding, and then how can we move forward to that, and how can we, start little by little also changing the way that people think, and to wants to support as well to this concept and to be involved in it.
One thing that I'm trying to process the whole intervention by Ken Webster is, okay, money drives everything. Please correct me if if I understood it well or not. So if money is the driving force for change, how are we foreseeing the next coming years, in the sense that who are at the end of the day, the decision makers? Who are the individuals? Because this all ends up with human beings making decisions, right? And they're individuals that sit on a board of a large pension fund or whatever big investment firm, right? And they make decisions and say, we are going to subsidize fossil fuel industry, or we're going to go that direction. What triggers these individuals to make these decisions towards the direction that we're all looking for? Does it come to a point where a son or a daughter has to confront that individual and say, "Daddy or mommy, what are you doing for, the emotional perspective to it?" Or is there other ways to incentivize somebody in that position to change their mindset and make decisions towards what we call sustainable circular economy of the future? And it's more like a reflection or a question to the group. I have no idea how to get to that point, because if money decides everything, well, let's focus on that and what can or cannot be done.
I think that there is a certain part of enlightened self-interest that, you get a realization at some point that we just can't go on this way. Now, when you come to that realization and what triggers it, I think that can change for people. But when I think of the work that we've done recently, Kevin, looking back at some of the circular economy roadmaps that have been put out over the last few years in Europe, it's clear that there's a lot of governmental intervention in Europe that we haven't got at the same level yet in the rest of the world. And there's money coming out of the EU, which is helping to drive pilot projects and trying things and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't work and course correcting. That sort of an operationalizing of this thinking is going on much more in Europe. Now, some of it's beginning to spread because some of that development money is coming into the region. But I think we need to go back and as Ken was suggesting, not always reinvent the wheel and start over. We can look at what's worked and what hasn't worked somewhere else. And I think one of the things that I've certainly seen looking at those other roadmaps is that, yes, there is a growing recognition that some of these incentives and barriers need to be changed. There are barriers to doing some of this circularity work just because we put regulations in 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago that haven't changed. And we have to go back and revisit some of these and change them to make those barriers become enablers, and to change some of these perverse subsidies. They're now perverse. Maybe there were good reasons for those subsidies at one point when we were thinking in a particular way, but now we know differently. We have to change these things. So I think there's an enlightened self-interest, but it comes from many places.
I had a question. You mentioned that you work on a roadmap specifically for Aruba, for example. Can you mention, for example, 3 projects that you will start with? Maybe Kevin can go over this topic.
Yes, but before entering into that, I think Juana had an interrelated comment. No? specific activities. First of all, education. So meaning there's still a lack of general awareness and understanding of the principles of circular economy. I like to use the word principles because when we enter into the definition of it, it becomes very ambiguous. It depends on who you ask, and they will give you their own version of it. But at least with principles, you can say, okay, those are values and things that we can all generally agree upon. In the context of Aruba, because of lack of resources and asking what is it that we have to offer, because it also has to be placed within a realistic, practical context, that any of these solutions will only be supported if they lead to the intended objectives. And one of them is Aruba is in deep troubles right now because of COVID effect and the shutdown of the tourism sector. So we depend basically on tourism for to run our economy. So in this case, whatever we generate, in this case knowledge about circular economy, we can convert that into an asset, a value that we can export as part of our services to our neighboring islands, the region. What I mean with that, really professionalizing it, no? So investing in research and development, the academic preparations, the curriculum, university, this whole academic sector has to be invested heavily in it here in Aruba, because we have these competitive advantages compared to the region, that we have access to European universities and US. We combine we have our colleagues from Latin America, so we are able to bring all this knowledge together into one point and use Aruba as a hub specialized in circular economy. So that's an ambition, right? We are far from reaching to that point. That's the reality right now. But if you have to have a plan, you have to have a direction you want to go, and this matches or fits within our reality as Aruba. Because if you're going to say, oh, I'm going to start exporting product A, and we have preferential access to the European Union, but if your system still depends on a third country of where you have to extract the natural resource or whatever the primary materials that will come to the island, you fabricate it into something of a higher value added product, and for the aim to export, you're still stuck within that lack of resiliency, the level of being able to prepare for external shocks. So it's a difficult challenge to balance out and take into account all these different dimensions that are needed for you to say, okay, this makes sense for our context. And that's why the point of community is so important, because maybe at the end of the day, and Ken Alston mentions this a lot, that probably circular economy is all gonna be about local solutions while thinking global, because the difference between Europe and Latin America is so obvious. The Europeans are driven by the fact that they don't have the natural resources, they don't have the energy that they need to sustain the modern society that they know, right? While in this region, we are blessed with all the natural resources that you can imagine, right? But there's a lack of notion, understanding that we could leapfrog towards a direction if we consciously invest our available resources, capital, and money, consciously in upgrading ourselves and be able to leapfrog and change the whole dynamics of powers, which Ken Webster mentioned earlier, in the sense of having a different bargaining position at the table. Then the whole dynamic with, for instance, Europe changes, because now you're not the one just extracting your natural resources or using your agricultural sector for commodities, heading towards another region in the world, converted, for instance, in Asia into technologies like computers, telephones, whatever, and then they come back at a premium price. And you ask yourself, what is the benefit for me in this whole equation from this region's perspective, right? That's the same thing with the African continent. So, and the beauty of it is that you mentioned the communities in the traditional societies that are more in line or more conscious about their environment and have been living for thousands of years in their direct environment without impacting them. We can learn a lot from the indigenous communities from Latin America, from Africa, from Asia, from other places, and try to fit that into the modern world, which is another part of the discussion. So, education, to answer your question. Secondly, analyze what we import. Make sure that whatever we import, we know ahead of time what we are going to use it for and what is its intended use after the first use. So if it's this cup of, whatever it's made of, it's probably biodegradable material. We know ahead of time, okay, we can import this because the first function is to contain liquid. We can drink it and use it. But after 5-10 minutes, we're done with it. But at least if we know ahead of time that where it's going to head to, we create the infrastructure, we create a system for it to allow us to convert this into another added value product, right? So then it doesn't mean that you just have to go and throw this into the landfill. You have an intended system in place and you consciously know what you want to attract to the island. So, and that is a whole exercise to understand the material flows, content, quality above all. Because if it's contaminated with carcinogens or whatever else, and you have no means to separate or find ways to protect your population from it, you should discard it. You should not even, include it in your options for your purchase. So that whole process, it's a whole exercise on its own. It's a whole discipline on its own to just figure out what we would like to prefer to enter the island. And I use words from Ken because we work so long together, and he always likes to make reference to those are the preferred materials I want. So you're not talking about I'm gonna be punitive. I'm gonna be I'm gonna blame or punish the other option. No, I'm gonna be positive. I'm gonna say we prefer this type of material because we know what we can do with it. We know we can extract value from it, and we know it will not generate undesired negative impacts over time because we have the means to deal with it, right? So that is the second point. And the third point is we are a very desertic island. How say that? We've passed the desertification, so it's very dry. We lost a lot of vegetations. So one basic and simple thing we can do is start simply planting trees. Basic ideas that, and if possible, even fruit trees, in the city or around the urban areas where people can just take a mango from the street and eat it, right? And share this asset. And it has so many multiple benefits of soil retention, quality, absorption of water, avoiding stormwater. I can go on and on, but that would be another initiative that you can easily. I don't see it as a rocket science, right? It just needs an effort and collective thinking and action on it to start doing it, and you would automatically see the benefit coming out of it. I've never seen anybody against planting a tree, ever.
If I may. No, that it is very interesting, that example that you give about the mango trees, because in the eastern savannas of Colombia, there's a city called Puerto Carreño, and they have mango trees everywhere. But the culture and the social aspect of it is if you eat mangoes are for poor people. So you don't eat mangoes because they are free. They are public. And it's very sad. It's very sad. But yes, it can happen that people are against planting trees, mango trees in cities, which is irrational.
If you put it in that context, in the sense of massive and land use changes, and
no,
a different.
It's just trees on the city. It's just a social norm that says that if you eat mangoes because they are free, and because they are free, they don't give you status, and the story is actually very sad because it's the indigenous peoples from that place that eat the mangoes because they don't have access to food, and then there are people that are not indigenous, they they look down on them. So it's and I make this point because the consumption side of the circular economy is also very important, the demand side, and the social innovation. So because some of us were talking about, yes, technologies, infrastructure, how do we move there, how people make decisions, and that's an issue that has not been explored as in depth as the technological part of the circular economy. And it's very important because, and there's an article talking about the circular rebound effect. I don't know if you have read it, but it says that in order to have to reach the circularity objectives, we need people to replace the things that they consume from linear products to circular products. If we don't reach that, if we have people buying new stuff and buying recirculated stuff, then we're gonna have more stuff, and we're not gonna reach the sustainability goals. So we need people to behave in certain ways, so we reach that perspectives. So, but we also need to change the meanings that are associated to circularity and uncirculated products and practices, and that means that we don't only need to change policy, we don't only need to change businesses, we also need to work with cultural devices, with advertising industry, with cinema, with all those media that tells us what we should consume, how our identity is created. Because so far, if you eat mango, you're poor, you're not advanced, you're not, in this case that I was giving. But if you eat something that is imported, then it makes you cooler and it makes you a better person. So we need to work with this cultural media that deliver cultural messages to start changing that and making recirculation, making sustainability not cool. No, because that's another idea that if you're rich, you're gonna be sustainable, and poor people can't be sustainable. So, but it's more about changing the narrative towards more sustainable and more circular societies. So that's very important.
Well, I think some of that comes back to something we touched on maybe an hour ago, which is language. And I think we have to think about this word even consumption, because most of the things we're actually concerned about, we aren't consuming, we're using. I use a cell phone, I don't consume it. And so I think this gets back to the biological cycle and technical cycle concept, which underpins the circular economy from McDonough and Brongart's work in Cradle to Cradle, is some things really are consumed. I consumed my breakfast, but I'm not consuming my cell phone, I'm not consuming this microphone. I'm using it. And we have to, if we begin to use more precision in our language like this, we can say which are the things that truly are going to be used and which ones are going to be truly consumed. And with the mango is going to be consumed, and even if you peel it, right, the peelings will go into the biological cycle and will be reused, but it is sort of more consumption. It goes away and comes back as a nutrient. And so I think we have to educate people. This is what you're saying, but use all the different forms that are available to help people think about these differences, and then change the business models. Because instead of me having to buy my cell phone, and now I own the molecules, what do I do with it when I want the next version in 2 more years, or whenever it runs out of memory, or whatever the problem is? I don't have a service contract. If I had a service contract where the Apple or Samsung or Google, whoever it is, gets the phone back, they have to deal with the next use and the reuse of the materials. I just want the use of a phone. And so I think we've to help people understand these differences between what we're just using and therefore we can reuse if we put the infrastructure in, if we get the designs right from the beginning, because many of the things that we might like to reuse, we can't easily reuse because they were never designed to be taken apart to be able to be reused. And so the thing does come back all the way to the design again, as Ken said at the beginning, Ken Webster said, we have to design things so that they are capable of going through these different systems in a different way that allow us then to change our relationship with them at a societal level.
I'd like to add something at this
Thank
point.
you so much for your feedbacks. Also, one thing I think, as you mentioned, it's also to do with the culture. In some culture, not all culture people want to even share things. So share objects. That's also, I think, something to do with culture. And also, for example, in Europe, you see a lot of thrift stores or secondhand stores that also you don't see everywhere, especially in the Caribbean. Sometimes you don't see that. So it's really also a culture thing.
Well, my research in my PhD was about that. What drives people to engage with circular solutions, and first, what factors make them accept, so have the intention to participate, but also what makes it adopt these solutions. And I focused exactly on product service systems, which are basically about sharing or renting. So it's use-based, it's use-oriented. And I did a study in Colombia and one in India and one with people from the US. And it was very interesting to see that on the one hand, the cultural aspects are very important. The hygienic aspects are also very important. And it's not just about economics. It's not just about knowledge. It's about these perceptions, beliefs that we have. So again, in places like Latin America, Colombia, sharing, bartering, they are associated with previous times, with moments in history where there was not much abundance. So poverty is still linked to these practices. So that is one barrier to exchanging. But if it's between family, people that then it's a different thing. In Europe, it's with strangers, but here it has to be with someone closer to you. And also there are very different psychological factors that also influence. For example, I did a questionnaire, a survey with a toy exchange service, toy sharing service in India. This was online. So, and people, the desire for control, so knowing where everything comes from, who made it, that's also a very important factor that influence your. So when you share information about the place where the toy came, so who was the person, the kid that used it, blah blah blah, then that influences the acceptance and the will to participate in these services. So I think, and as Ken mentioned, these aspects and these models can be developed here and used here, but you need to be very aware of the culture and the factors that influence people's behavior. I think Ken wanted to say something.
Hello?
Ken, you wanted to say something? Sorry.
Yeah, I'd like to say something if it's possible. Yeah.
Yes,
I don't know
please
if you
go
can
ahead,
hear me,
Ken.
but sound coming back is very, very poor now. I basically have to just, I just wanted to comment on the tension between the consumer and the user and the producer. I've got a lot of respect for the work of Paul Ekins in the University College London, And he says that it's a very bad idea for consumers to be responsible for end-of-life materials. It's not worked very well. And he lists 5 reasons, and I'm just going to tell you what they are. Waste materials have zero or negative value to consumers. They don't know what exactly the materials are in their products. They don't have any say in how the companies design their products, yet they're required to take responsibility for how they're disposed of. Waste is ultimately passed to the remediation authority in a disordered and hard to recycle state, making waste management expensive and 100% recycling virtually impossible. So what about shifting the responsibility for waste to producers? And I think this idea of total product liability is growing rapidly. There are papers on it in Finland and in Europe. We don't want to emphasize the customer's role. The customer's role is to choose the products and services that they like. And the business's role is to deliver that in a much better way than they're doing at the moment, so that it is an opportunity, a business opportunity, not seeing what you can get away with. And this idea of total product liability looks like the best way to do this. I don't think we need to, final point, because I have to drop off this call after this comment. The final point I want to make is that I think it's really difficult to use circular as a way of persuading consumers of anything. Many people who are interested in it might take notice, but it was the problem with the sustainability selling green products. They're very often higher cost. They're almost used as a moral statement. Look, I've got these locally produced fava beans or something. Look, we'll have those for tea. So it doesn't necessarily apply very well to when the poor are making decisions. So it has to be a lot more systemic than that. And I think the role of the correct incentives, making sure the responsibility is on the producer, and providing tax and spend regimes that enable more people who are less well off to participate in the economy, is the way that we will find a way through this. I think there's a terrible habit for people who are relatively well paid, like me, to adopt the moral high ground. And I'll just point out America's experience. When people suggested that those who voted for Donald Trump were deplorables back in 2016, the result was that the deplorables won. And even after 4 years of Trump rule, there wasn't a landslide against him. Perhaps Joe Biden is a weak candidate, yes. But the point is, 73 million people are not happy with the way the economy is run. And so we can't join that group of people who are just holding the moral high ground and saying, well, you should buy circular products or sustainable products. Because these people will say to us, well, where's my jobs? Where's my income? How do I get by? What's the future for my children? Why can't my child buy a house anymore? And I think we ought to be able to be quite careful about how we frame discussions of circular economy to make sure we don't lose track of the very serious changes which are happening in the economic political landscape at the moment. A lot of people in the middle class sense just think that these people are ignorant, that they dislike, and that somehow they need to be disciplined. And I think this is just not the right way to go. We don't want to be hectoring people into making the right decisions. We want to be enabling them to make the decisions they want because they're all good. And I think that's the task. And if it becomes all good, they themselves will become much more tolerant and able to join in with society. So I think that's what I'd want to say. I notice nobody picked up back on the money question, because I think people don't understand money. I have to say that. They don't know what to suggest. And probably it's a bit strange. I don't know if Aruba is a tax haven, because the British and the Dutch are famous for having tax havens and very much facilitate offshore banking. But I think there are questions around the way the financial system relates to the rest of the economy. So thank you for your invitation and for your excellent comments. It really got me interested and excited to talk about it, and I wish you all good luck with the rest of your program. Bye for now.
Thank you. Thank you, Ken. Kevin, do you want to comment about what Ken just said?
Yes, first of all, thank Ken very much for joining us in this first session of CEFA 2020. It's always a delight to have a conversation with him. You feel like you're in a seat and you're running like along an intellectual journey, and it's really nice. And that he's always willing and able to join us and cooperate with us. And regarding he mentioned so many things, and we have collectively discussed so many elements that I guess the one who sees this session will get blown away with all the different directions that can be taken when you touch the topic of circular economy. But not even circular economy itself. It's what Ken mentioned at the end, like what drives people for the decisions. What are they really concerned about? What are their priorities? And when everything else falls out of the place, what do? You lean on your family, your closest people, the people that you really care and love, and you try to figure out a way to work yourself out of a situation. And if we could, as a society, start extending that feeling into a more as a community or a wider society, and see us as one single species as part of a bigger picture. Who knows? This is all philosophical, I know. It's very conceptual. But at the end of the day, you need to have these conversations, because that is the opportunity we get to enlighten each other and motivate each other or inspire each other. And that's what I wanted to say, but my line of thought just deviated completely. I don't remember exactly what the question was, but in essence, yeah, thanks to Ken for joining us. That's first of all. And I guess we are closing, reaching to the limit, right, for this session?
Indeed, we had some awesome conversation this morning. I think we're gonna give everybody opportunity to give some closing comments, some thoughts for path forward. We're gonna start with Juana.
Thank you, Rubiela. Well, it was a very interesting conversation. I really like the different topics that we touch upon. The circular economy, it's a complex issue, as we have mentioned today. It's a very nice concept and idea, and I think it's very robust, and it has evolved since 2012 when it started. And I think I'm very happy to be part of this community, but also it's a challenging issue for implementation in especially developing countries. So I think we need to keep on working. We need to keep educating ourselves, recognize our strengths as developing countries, and work on that so we can make the transition, but also leapfrog towards a circular economy. So thank you very much for your moderation.
Thank you, indeed. I think by making baby steps and then leapfrog, but we need to move forward. That I think is the message. Also, Maria?
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation, for being here. It was wonderful to hear all of you. Also, yes, following what you were saying, Juana, it's not about promoting only as a passive action, but also trying to engage more people at the different levels. Like for example, in education, at the schools, universities, like public organizations, international organizations. How can we change this concept of sustainability, but in a circular way. So thank you very much.
Well, to build on what Ken said in his final remarks, I'm reminded of a picture that I use in many of my presentations, which is an old picture I found of myself from 30 years ago when I was working in business. And I had a green product in my hand, and it was I was a marketing director for a consumer products company at the time. And I learned from that what Ken said is that green products is not the right way forward. Circular products per se, if that's your idea, no, it's not that. We should be talking about what's good, what's quality, and how you define quality within the context of where you are. Because if it's just green, it's a niche, and we shouldn't be talking about anything to do with a niche. This is about everything in the world, how we live and how we work, how we socialize, and so it can't be pushed into a niche. So I completely agree with Ken, and I would just say, wow, there is so much in this complexity that is good. And I'm looking forward to the next few days of going into the detail, into that complexity, even more in some of the other sessions.
Thank you very much. So, what we are from my side, what I learned a lot today is that it's not linear anymore. It just everything is circular, and it starts. It's everything. It's the people. It's the design. It's the economy. Basically, it's everything. So I want to thank you all to be here at the CEFA and enjoy the rest of the sessions. Thank you so much.